The first thing I think that is most important in these situations is just to explain very clearly what happened that night.
Okay.
Was it a pre-planned party or was it a work event that turned into something else?
Look, the first thing to say is I want to start with an apology. Whatever happened, it was an error of judgment. So I want to own that. I've had a young team. Yeah. They've been working very hard for months at a time. And I came back from an event and they were there all set up, sort of ready to go. And I spoke to them and then we took the infamous photo. I wish at that point I had said, hold on a second, we're straying here, but we're going too far. But I didn't. And I want to own that because, yes, I had senior members of the team, but it is my team and I should have owned that. So I want to just take that on board. I think the other thing to say was we were in a workplace bubble. We were working together. It felt quite natural. I had been, earlier that day, I had a really busy day, so I'd just come from a string of 4 interviews. I'd come back, you know, to look at some paperwork to go off to be on Newsnight, so I tootled off on Newsnight. So I wasn't there long, but the point was I was there long enough, and I could have and should have said, hold on, chaps, girls, we're going the wrong way with this. Let's move back.
Because to clarify, Shaun, you leave and the party seems to become quite wild, and this is a fact. You know, there have been 4 members of your team disciplined officially.
Yeah, that's correct.
Doors were kicked in, but what you're saying is that happened after you left. When you were there, it wasn't this raucous party.
No, look, you remember when I was on Nigel's show, I don't even drink, I'm teetotal. So I've come back in a work mode because I'm trying to think about going on Newsnight. And they had some nibbles and I spoke to the team, thank you boys, thank you girls for all the work you'd done. And then they went on and went long late into night. But the point is, I could have been part of the process of stopping it and I wasn't. I could have said to them, actually, nibble at your desk. You know what I mean? Let me make sure you're finished by the time I'm done at Newsnight. I could have said 100 things, but I didn't. Focused on work, whatever. And these things happened, and CCHQ stepped in. They stepped in. They stepped in and said, "Look, we're going to have to discipline some people," and they went ahead and disciplined people. And it was the right thing to do. Those people have been very contrite. They've said, "Yes, you know, we put the hands up." CCHQ came down quite heavily on people, and we're all moving on.
Because, Shaun, do you understand why people are so angry about this? It's not because of what you did. It's because of who you all are. You were representatives of the Tory government, essentially, who had locked the rest of us down, who had stopped us from seeing dying relatives, who had stopped us from socialising with our loved ones at Christmas. And that's where the rage comes from. There's a feeling, and you can tell me if this is true or not, but there's a feeling that there was almost like a complete and total disregard for the rules among Tory staff members, and especially those staff members connected to them.
What I will say, I certainly felt, and I really do understand the anger, because you saw people who didn't see their parents, who couldn't see their children, all kinds of things. I remember so many of our own team were staying in London because they couldn't go home to their parents and all sorts. So that I fully understand where the anger comes from. But that's where the apology comes from. I'm only a person. I'm not perfect. I missed that opportunity to do the right thing. And that's why I wanted to sort of come out and say, look, there's 100 different reasons. I could say I was busy. I could say I was in the room for 10 minutes, but that's not the point. The point is I want to apologise, because this isn't about, you know, like you said, what I'd done. It's about who I am and what we as a country were being asked to do. And I failed in my duty in that. And I have absolutely no problem at all apologising for that.
Do you think that your campaign at the time should have been public about what happened, been completely transparent, given these people were disciplined? Because, you know, in all of these cases, Shaun, sometimes it's the cover-up that is worse than the crime. And it feels like you sort of hoped you were going to get away with this.
It wasn't so much that we hoped you were going to get away. You could always be more public. Let me make that point. Now, you could always be, but I'd have loved to have said, look, this is what's gone on. People were disciplined. It took time to get to that point because we had to find out just exactly how long this has gone on. Was it organised? Who was in charge? Who was going to take responsibility for this? and CCHQ roading very quickly, but it had to be thorough because these people are actual employees. So you can't just willy-nilly point people out. You have to do them properly.
Was some of the people in that photo from Number 10? Were they staff members at Number 10?
No. If there's one thing in the photo that is good, it's evidential. There's nobody there from any other place other than my team. And you then had...
And some of them had been seconded.
Yeah, they've been seconded across.
Okay.
No, they've been seconded from
the Conservative Party.
From CCHQ. They've been seconded to my team, and we absorbed them. They were fully functioning team members. So I didn't even want to say, well, you from CCHQ. I didn't think that was fair. I felt like, look, we'd adopted you. You'll take the rise and the fall with us.
And look, you've had to take a real hit as a result of this. The media coverage has been brutal. There's been a lot of criticism of you personally. And then today you had to stand down as chair of the police committee in the London Assembly. Can you just explain how that all came about?
I stood down a few days ago now, and that's... Look, the real thing is this. So many people supported me, you know. I couldn't go anywhere in London without someone coming up and saying, Shaun, you're the guy, thank you, I love you, your fresh start, I love you and alternatives, you know, go, go, go. That's why I stood down, because I was elected to London Assembly, but also I was the mayoral candidate, and I got 45% of the vote. Some polls had me down at 23%. I absolutely smashed.
You came close to a massive upset.
And that for me is the huge failing. For those people, they'll look at this and say, Shaun, I thought you was our guy, and I want to continue to be their guy. So that's why I stood down. And the additional piece to that is two additional pieces. One, my colleagues. My colleagues are a great bunch, and they're going to have a rough ride with me, and they didn't deserve that. And I wanted to show them that I'm serious about being contrite. I'm not just saying nice words. It's a big loss. Yeah. So I stood down.
You're a big supporter of the Prime Minister. Have you apologised personally to him, and have you spoken to him since these revelations emerged?
So I've written to the PM and said, look, I'm sorry. He'll write back to me. We sort of have a pace at which we can write to and fro, because obviously the man's running the country. He'll write back to me. But I get the distinct impression he's a little bit disappointed in what I did. I'm disappointed in what I did. But he feels like, to me, one of the people I let down. I mean, my mum sent me a text, and I'm a teeny bit of a mum's boy. If my mum said something, it's kind of impactful for me.
Say?
She said, I hope this is not true. And I had to go back and say, I was there. I have an uncle called Dennis who's taken our granddad to hospital, and he texted me from the hospital saying, I hope this party stuff isn't true, and I had to go back and say, unfortunately it is. And
so letting down your family is almost the worst thing, almost worse than letting down the PM.
I'd say one thing, letting down the activists. There's people up and down London who've never done any political activity before, who gave me money so I could print leaflets, delivered those leaflets, supported me on Twitter. That's the pleasure and the burden of being in this position.
But look, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I've made a lot of them. And I think one of the most important things is about owning those mistakes. And obviously, I think you still have a really big political future ahead of you. I presume you're not going to let this stop you go on with that goal.
It would take more than this to stop me. I'm only a man. I'm not perfect. I never purported to be perfect. Yes, I wish this hadn't happened, but it has. But what I want to do is deliver for London. I mean, half the reason the heat has been so high, yes, because people think, well, we were in tier 2. But others, because there's political forces who want to remove me. They know the scrutiny that I've brought to the mayor's crime plan is blazing hot for him. They know that they voted for me. They want me to represent them. Because, as you all know, my politics is about people who have to work for a living. If you lose a week's wages and it makes a difference to you, I'm your guy. I want to make sure that you can feed your kids. I want to make sure you can live somewhere safe. And this pressure cooker I'm in, this mistake I made, does not change that. I still want to do well for people.